Hey guys, tonight we begin somewhere very far from your usual bedtime routine. There's no mattress, no blankets, and definitely no Wi-Fi. Instead, you're waking up on a thin wool mat inside a circular yurt, its felt walls groaning slightly in the morning wind that whistles across the steppe. Outside, you can already hear the distant whinny of horses and the low crackle of a fire. A pot of something vaguely dairy-based is steaming nearby. It smells committed. You're in the Mongol Empire, sometime in the mid-13th century. And, unfortunately, you've got a job. You're a courier in the YAM system, the Mongol communication network, so efficient it would put most medieval European kingdoms to shame. Your assignment? Carry a message from here, somewhere in the outer grasslands near what today would be Kazakhstan, all the way to Karakorum, just a few hundred miles away. And yes, you probably won't survive this. The horses are fast, the food is questionable, and if you lose that little leather pouch hanging from your sash, the next guy might not even wait for orders to execute you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time you're watching. I love seeing where this sleepy little caravan wanders. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink hard, trying to push off the sleep that still clings to you like yurt smoke in your nostrils. Your host family is already up, gruff but kind people who've taken you in for the night as a favor to the local postmaster. They speak a dialect you barely understand, but kindness doesn't always need words. You're handed a chunk of dried meat and a ladle of salty milk tea. Breakfast of champions. Outside, your horse is already saddled, an agile steppe pony, not tall, but all tendon and grit. Its mane is trimmed, its eyes sharp. The Mongols don't believe in waste, especially not when it comes to time or animal energy. This horse has likely already made dozens of these trips. You, on the other hand, have barely figured out how to balance a letter pouch against your belt without it slapping your thigh every time you trot. The postmaster, a man with a beard so long it seems to coil into his robe, eyes you critically. He hands over a small, sealed scroll inside a leather tube. A strip of wax covers the top, bearing the imperial tamga, the symbol of the Great Khan. You're now a strand in a vast and invisible web that stretches across an empire. And here's the thing. This whole system, this enormous, relentless network of riders, yurts, and handwritten messages actually worked. It worked so well that Marco Polo couldn't shut up about it when he got back to Europe. He claimed it was faster and better organized than anything he'd seen in Venice, and he wasn't wrong. Historians still argue whether the Mongols were just pragmatic or if they truly revolutionized the way empires thought about communication. As you begin your ride, it's not lost on you that everything depends on horses. Not just any horses, Mongol horses. They're short, durable, nearly weatherproof. You could tie one up for days with just a few mouthfuls of grass and it wouldn't complain. More importantly, the Mongols station fresh horses every 25 to 30 miles. So you don't need to rely on one animal to go the full distance. You ride hard, swap for a fresh one, and ride again. Like a relay race, but with less lycra and more fermented mare's milk. Your first stretch is uneventful. Broad hills, brown grass rolling endlessly toward the horizon. The only sounds are your pony's breathing, the wind hissing through dry reeds, and your own thoughts. You check the pouch for the 10th time. Still there, still sealed. You imagine it glowing like a little sun, pulsing with responsibility. You pass a few shepherds along the way, one of whom waves with a hand wrapped in a wool mitten that looks like it was once a sock. Another offers you what you think is a chunk of cheese, though it tastes more like slightly damp chalk. You nod politely and ride on. Halfway through the day, you reach your first orto, a relay station. These aren't fancy, usually just a few yurts, a hitching post, and someone cranky watching the road. But they're the beating hearts of this entire system. Riders rest, eat, and more importantly, swap mounts here. Some stations are manned by former soldiers, others by families who've lived there for generations. This one is run by a woman named Tuya, who inspects your scroll like a jeweler checking for fakes. Satisfied, she signals to her son, who brings out a lean, well-brushed mare. Tuya narrows her eyes at your saddle strap, tightens it, then sends you off without a word. By the time the sun starts to dip, the wind has picked up. The Mongol plains don't do gentle breezes. It's either calm or it wants your ears. You make camp in a windbreak formed by two large rocks and try to remember how many more stops are between you and your final destination. You think it's around 17, but who's counting? Your hands are cracked from the dry air, your legs feel like wooden poles, and you're pretty sure you swallowed a bug around noon. As you drift toward sleep, a few truths settle in your mind. One, this entire system runs on trust. No one checks inside the sealed messages. No one delays longer than needed. Even when the empire sprawled from the Pacific to the Black Sea, it held together partly because of this disciplined communication web. And two, you're now part of it. A tiny, over-caffeinated thread in a vast tapestry of dusty hooves and galloping urgency. And weirdly, that kind of feels good. The next morning comes with a grunt from your horse and the sound of a dried leaf skittering across stone. You're up before the sun this time, not because you're especially motivated, but because it turns out Mongol steppe nights are cold enough to freeze ambitions solid. Your fingers fumble with your saddle buckle as light creeps over the horizon in long golden ribbons. Time to go. You mount up, shift in the saddle, and set off toward the next ortu, which should be about 28 miles away. You hope. It's hard to be sure. Directions here often go something like, ride until you smell smoke or see a very tired goat. The landscape hasn't changed much, still the wide, endless plains, but you notice now how much the Mongol route is built around rhythm. It's not just about riding hard, it's about knowing when to ride, how much to conserve, and, most importantly, how to swap everything at the exact right time. Because here's the trick the Mongols understood better than anyone. You don't need one perfect horse. You need a system of horses. Every few miles, a fresh one. They called it the Yam, and at its height, it stretched over 140,000 miles. That's more than 5 times the width of the continental U.S., and that's if you ignore elevation and weather and random livestock crossing the road. Your first horse today is sturdy but not quick, the kind of mount you'd trust to carry you out of danger, not into it. Still, she gets the job done, and before long, you see the next post rising ahead. Just a circle of smoke and 2 yurts, but it might as well be a palace. A wiry teenager meets you with a slightly sleepy bow. He's holding a lead rope for your next ride, a small, fierce-looking gelding with a lot of opinions. You dismount, stretch your legs, ouch, and pass your scroll over for inspection. Here's something most people don't realize. The scroll isn't just paper. It's sealed with a tamga, a stamped emblem of imperial authority. Mess with it and you're in very deep trouble. Lose it and the consequences are worse. Historians still argue whether couriers caught slacking were really executed on the spot or just demoted, but it's safe to say this wasn't a gig for the casually tardy. Anyway, you're off again. This new horse moves like a caffeinated shadow, darting through grass and over shallow streams with barely a change in breath. You try to count hoofbeats to pass the time. You make it to 2,478 before a small bird startles the horse, and you nearly fall off. It's around midday when you spot a small rest stop, not a formal or two, just a way station with a cook fire and a few stools. You stop, mostly because your legs now have the consistency of stewed radish. The man tending the fire nods at your pouch, then offers you something warm in a horn cup. Yak butter tea. The beverage of champions. Thick, salty, faintly cheesy, and somehow both warm and oily. It coats your throat like a wool scarf. And unfortunately, it's essential fuel for couriers. You'll need the fat later, especially if you're caught in the night chill again. You also grab a bite to eat, dried mutton jerky, and a mysterious paste you don't ask questions about. There's a quiet camaraderie here. The other riders nod, but don't speak. It's understood that you're all part of the same invisible river, carrying thoughts and orders across the empire. Back in the saddle, your path narrows. Hills rise and fall like sleeping giants. In the distance, you see a cloud of dust, a caravan perhaps, or a detachment of soldiers. You steer away just in case. Mongol couriers weren't just fast, they were expected to be invisible when needed. The fewer delays, the better. In fact, Genghis Khan reportedly punished entire villages if a courier's progress was slowed by locals refusing to offer fresh horses. The great Khan apparently did not accept "my goat was blocking the trail" as an excuse. By late afternoon, you're running low on energy. The sun blazes overhead, and the saddle has become less a seat and more a blunt torture device. You whistle a tune to distract yourself, but the only response is a prairie dog giving you the stink eye from its burrow. Still, you push on. The genius of the system is starting to sink in now. With riders like you changing every few dozen miles, a message can cover up to 200 miles a day. Something that would take weeks in Europe, where couriers were often just guys with donkeys and time. And the Mongol stations? They're built like a nervous system. Each relay point logs who passed through, when, and what they were carrying. There's a paper trail, literally. Some stations even have scribes to jot down brief reports. One of the more bizarre innovations you've heard of is that certain elite couriers were given Jurge tokens, small tablet-shaped passports that gave them free access to supplies, food, and fresh horses across the entire empire. Flash your Jurge and people drop everything to help you. Think of it as a medieval Mongol VIP pass, except instead of a nightclub, you get dried goat and a new pony. Toward the end of your ride, you spot a family moving their yurt. The felt walls are bundled onto a cart pulled by oxen, and several children are arguing over a lamb. You wave, and the oldest girl waves back with both hands. It's a brief moment of brightness. You reach the next station just as twilight begins to fall. This one has a permanent cooking pot going. Probably hasn't been washed since the last eclipse, but the stew smells amazing. You're offered a bowl and a place by the fire. Here's where you get to breathe, just for a bit. You stretch out near the yurt, feel the steam from your bowl rise up into the chill air, and watch the stars come out. No matter how many days you do this, the sky always steals your words. And somewhere out there, someone is waiting for the message you're carrying. Maybe it's a warning, maybe it's a trade route update, maybe it's a birthday greeting from one noble to another. The content doesn't matter. What matters is that it moves. Because in the Mongol Empire, to stop moving was to fall behind. To fall behind, well, you've heard the stories. As you pull your blanket over your shoulders, you think about how bizarre it is that this system, built out of yurts and hooves and butter tea, was more efficient than what most kings in Europe ever managed. And tomorrow, it continues. You wake up to the smell of smoke and something definitely dairy-based sizzling in a pot nearby. Morning on the steppe is less of a sunrise and more of a sharp, cold slap to the face. Your joints ache from yesterday's ride, your blanket has slid halfway into the dirt, and a curious sheep is standing 3 inches from your head, chewing in your general direction. You sit up, stretch, and notice the station's cook handing you a bowl. Inside, a generous scoop of something porridge-like, floating with fat globules. You give it the old, polite courier nod and start eating. It's not bad exactly, just rubbery. There's also a little something crunchy in there. You try not to think too hard about it. Once you've eaten and swapped out your horse, you check your gear. You've still got your wax-sealed scroll, miracle of miracles, and your satchel contains a pouch of salted cheese curds, 2 flints, a needle and thread, and a small knife with a handle made from what might be bird bone. Standard courier kit. Also tucked in there, a small bundle of herbs you were given back at your last major stop. For digestion, they said. You haven't used it yet, but after this morning's mystery stew, you might want to reconsider. Before you mount up again, you make yourself a quick batch of yak butter tea. Mongol couriers swore by it for endurance. And sure, it's salty and oily and slightly unsettling when it congeals at the edges, but it does keep your belly lined and your mind focused. Plus, it's warm. And here, that's enough. You ride out onto the trail, hooves muffled in the thick grass. The rhythm of the pony becomes your rhythm again. Not fast, but relentless. Mongol couriers weren't expected to gallop constantly. They were expected to arrive, preferably not frozen or collapsed. Your thoughts wander, as they often do during the quietest stretches. You wonder what's in the message you're carrying. Could be anything. The Mongol Empire had dispatches ranging from grand military orders to, allegedly, instructions for wedding gifts. Maybe what you're hauling is a sternly worded memo about someone's late tribute payment, or a politely phrased, "You're fired," from the great Khan himself. Historians still argue whether these messages were always personally read by someone of authority or passed along like sacred relics by clerks and officers. What's certain is that every scroll carried the weight of imperial presence, every seal a little echo of Genghis Khan's thunder. You start to notice small cairns along the path, stacked stones with colored cloth tied to them, waymarkers, prayers, offerings to the spirits of the land. You pause at one, reach into your pouch, and tie a small scrap of fabric to the top. It flaps lazily in the wind. You're not especially superstitious, but out here, can't hurt. As midday approaches, you stop briefly to water your horse at a shallow stream. You crouch to rinse your face, feeling the grit of the trail melt off your skin. The air smells like sun-warmed grass and river silt. For a few moments, you just breathe. Even on a mission, there's peace in this place. Just when you're considering taking a slightly longer rest, you hear it, a low, rolling rumble from the west. You stand quickly. It's not thunder, it's hooves. A small convoy of riders emerges from the ridge. At the front is a man in heavy armor, riding a jet-black stallion. They're not postal riders, they're military, probably en route to the same destination you are. They nod as they pass, but there's no pause. Mongol military units use the yam routes too. In fact, part of why the system functioned so well was because it was designed for both peacetime messages and wartime commands. You remember hearing that during major campaigns, entire regiments could receive coordinated instructions across thousands of miles faster than most European kings could summon their own barons. Part of that came from planning, sure, but part of it was the yam.
You set off again, a little faster now, trying to make up time. Your next relay station appears just past a rise, a cluster of yurts, 2 horses grazing nearby, and the faint sound of someone singing off-key. You're greeted by a stout woman who's busy churning something in a wooden tub. She doesn't stop churning as she looks you over. "Scroll?" she asks, holding out a calloused hand. You pass it to her with practiced care. She doesn't open it, just inspects the seal, sniffs it for some reason, then nods and hands it back. "Your horse's hooves are dry," she adds, pointing. "Ointment, there." She gestures with her chin toward a clay jar by the fire. You hop down and do your duty. Hoof health is serious business here. As you're doing this, her son, maybe 12, plops down beside you and starts chatting. You don't catch all the words, but you gather that a cousin recently rode through with a broken arm and still delivered 2 scrolls on time. You nod with admiration and a pinch of dread. You thought your lower back pain was impressive. After a snack of fermented curds, much better than they sound, though they squeak when you chew, you mount up again and press on. The path narrows now, weaving between rocky outcrops and gullies. You pass a line of pack animals heading in the opposite direction, led by 2 traders with sun-scorched faces and enormous hats. They nod and exchange brief greetings. You swap a few words, mostly about weather and road conditions. Apparently, wolves have been spotted further south, near the foot of the mountains. Excellent. It's late afternoon when you crest another ridge and take in the sight, a long stretch of grassland broken by shallow rivers and a cluster of yurts far in the distance. That's your next goal. But between you and the yurts, a herd of wild marmots. You slow your horse and grin. These chubby, squirrel-like ground dwellers are having what appears to be a conference in the middle of the trail. You steer gently around them, but one seems to stare you down. You swear it narrows its eyes. Welcome to Mongol career life. One moment imperial majesty, the next marmot standoff. As you near the final station for the day, you can smell the fires before you see them. Someone's cooking flatbread, and your stomach responds with an opinion. The horses here look well fed, their coats shiny in the setting sun. You'll rest here tonight. You unsaddle your pony, give her a good rub-down, and feed her from a small bag of barley. Then you hand off the scroll again for logging. Yes, there's a scribe here, a thin man with ink stains on his fingertips. He makes a quick note in a leather ledger, then nods to you without a word. Inside the main yurt, a few riders are already relaxing. Some are playing a dice game, others snoozing in a heap near the wall. A bowl of something warm is handed to you, and you don't even ask what's in it. You eat. You smile. You live another day. And as the stars peek through the felt flaps above, you find yourself thinking, how strange that this system, made from horses, yurts, and human grit, could move messages faster than armored couriers in France or clerks in a Venetian court. Quaint, yes, but also brilliant. And you're just getting started.
The next morning, the scroll feels heavier somehow. Not physically, but in importance. Maybe it's the way the station scribe bowed slightly before handing it back to you. Or maybe it's just the growing ache in your thighs reminding you that this ride means something. Whatever the case, today's stretch feels more serious. Your new horse is a glossy bay with a stripe down its nose and the kind of twitchy energy that makes you question your life choices. You check the girth strap twice and mount up slowly. The station master gives you a nod, not exactly warm, but approving. It's like being given a slightly suspicious hug by someone who values punctuality more than people. As you ride, the wind shifts eastward, kicking up scents of distant grass fires and something sweet, wildflowers maybe. The trail today takes you past 2 small villages, each made of maybe 6 yurts and a stubborn goat herd. You're expected to ride straight through unless the pouch says otherwise. Yours doesn't. In fact, you're not even supposed to open it, ever. That's one of the first things they told you in courier training. The seal is sacred. Break it without cause, and you'd better start riding in the opposite direction fast. The message doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the Khan. And in the Mongol Empire, that basically means it belongs to fate. Still, you wonder, what is in the scroll? Could be orders to redirect a cavalry unit? Could be instructions for a tribute caravan. Could be something mundane, like confirming how many oxen a minor governor needs next spring. Historians still argue whether couriers carried only high-priority missives or a mix of political errands and day-to-day admin. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. After all, even the world's most terrifying warlord had paperwork. The wind picks up, tugging at your tunic, and you duck your head. A small flock of birds lifts off from the tall grass nearby, startled by your passage. You pass a weathered sign, painted wood half buried in the earth. It marks a tributary trail that splits east toward the Altai Mountains. You don't take it, of course, but you file the detail away. Good couriers keep mental maps. Your next relay post is an older one, with deep ruts worn into the ground by decades of hoof traffic. As you approach, a small group of men are playing a game that involves flicking carved ankle bones into a circle. They barely look up when you dismount. The station officer, a man with more braids than fingers it seems, greets you and asks for your scroll. You hand it over, and he gives the seal a long, squinting stare. Then, almost reverently, he tucks it into a pouch hung from his chest, logs your arrival, and gestures toward the fresh horse waiting nearby. This one is white, almost silver, and clearly bored. It doesn't so much trot as saunter out to you, flicking its ears as if to say, "I suppose you'll be needing me then." You make a quick switch and are off again, your pace faster now that the terrain has flattened. Here's something fun. The Mongols didn't just rely on land routes. Where rivers permitted, messages could be ferried via boat, small rafts or dugouts tied to the relay system. But the core of the yam was the horse. That's why the empire maintained herds of thousands,
all specifically designated for courier service.
Even European envoys commented on this. They couldn't believe how many horses the Mongols kept on hand for government mail. Some reports describe relay stations with hundreds of animals, ready to ride at a moment's notice. It made Europe's few clunky, mud-soaked wagons look downright embarrassing. You pass a flock of cranes resting by a shallow pond and allow yourself a moment to slow down. Your horse doesn't mind. The clouds above are gathering now, those low, dragging clouds that suggest rain by evening. You wrap your scarf tighter and press on. Around mid-afternoon, you encounter something unusual, a checkpoint. It's not common on most routes, but near sensitive regions, or where local governors were known to be particularly fussy, you could be stopped and questioned. Two guards emerge from behind a stand of trees. One holds a spear with a bronze head. The other has a scroll of his own and a sour expression. You dismount, show your pouch, and wait as they examine the seal. After a few tense seconds, they grunt approval and step aside. One of them eyes your horse jealously. You pretend not to notice. Back in the saddle, you think about how much this system relies on discipline, yours and everyone else's. There are no phones, no GPS, no panic buttons, only trust, paper, and protocol. You stop briefly to adjust your saddlebag and find something odd tucked in one of the side pockets. A small linen bundle you don't remember packing. Inside, a few chunks of dried root, tied with twine and marked with a smudge of ink. You frown. Maybe a station gift? Maybe just a forgotten item from the last rider. You decide not to think too hard about it and repack it carefully. The next post is one of the larger ones, complete with a stable, 2 yurts, and a well-maintained stone hearth. A pair of dogs lays by the fire, and one opens a lazy eye as you approach. You're offered stew, this time with turnips, and a place to rest your feet. You trade a few pleasantries with a courier heading west, who tells you he once outran a sandstorm in the Gobi by switching mounts mid-run. You don't entirely believe him, but it's the kind of story you want to believe. He warns you about a patch of boggy ground ahead. Watch the left bank, he says. Looks firm, but it'll eat your horse alive. You nod. Mental note number 78. Later that night, tucked under your cloak beside the fire, you lie awake longer than usual. The wind is sharp. Your fingers are dry and cracked. The scroll is still sealed, still safe. You think about all the others carrying messages tonight. Somewhere, riders gallop under a moonless sky, relaying updates from distant governors or coordinating caravan security. A network of thoughts on horseback. The Great Khan's empire wasn't just about conquest, it was about communication. He understood that to govern, you must connect. Cities can be built, armies can be raised, but without information, fast, reliable, and controlled, you have nothing but chaos on horseback. And here you are, a humble gear in that great galloping machine. Sleep takes you slowly, with the soft nicker of horses in the distance and the low crackle of a fire close to your ear.
You're jolted awake by something sniffing your foot. Reflexively, you sit up and swat the air, only to lock eyes with a long-snouted dog who looks deeply unimpressed by your reaction. It snorts, then pads away, as if it had merely been checking that your boots still smelled like regret. You rub your face, brush the dried grass from your clothes, and glance at the dim morning light stretching across the steppe. It's still early, but there's movement at the station. Someone is chopping wood, and a sleepy-looking apprentice is trying, and failing, to get a cooking fire going. You yawn, stretch, and prepare for another long day of riding. Today's route will take you through some of the more open grasslands, less hilly, more exposed. That means faster riding, but also fewer landmarks. You'll need to rely more on instinct, the horse, and the placement of sun and shadow. Mongol couriers were trained in basic navigation, even if most of it boiled down to don't fall into a ravine, and if you reach the mountains, you've gone too far. You mount your new horse, a short, barrel-chested gelding with a mild limp and an attitude like an old man who's been asked to dance. He's slow to start, but surprisingly quick once he finds his rhythm. You give him a soft kick, and the two of you roll into motion. By late morning, the landscape begins to shimmer with heat. A mirage dances ahead, just a thin shimmer where the air bends upward. You ignore it. You've been told that staring too long at mirages makes you start thinking about fruit stands and cold rivers that definitely don't exist. Instead, you hum a little tune, one you learned from a fellow courier back near the mountains. It's got no lyrics, just a rising and falling cadence like hoofbeats, comforting in a weird, repetitive way. You let the wind pull at your sleeves as you ride. There's something meditative about this part of the job. Just you, the horse, and the road. You've learned to let your thoughts come and go without grabbing hold of them. It's easier that way, like clouds rolling past. This is one reason some older couriers talk about the job like it's half profession, half pilgrimage. You pass by a tree that's been split by lightning, one of the only trees you've seen all day, and remember a story an old station keeper once told you. He claimed that in the early days of the Yam, Genghis Khan had a personal courier who rode through a lightning storm with a scroll tucked under his arm, and refused to stop, even after his horse threw a shoe. He kept running, he said, on foot, for 8 more miles, delivered the message, then collapsed in a stream. Do you believe it? Maybe not, but it's good to have stories on the trail. Around midday, you stop to water your horse at a lonely patch of wetland. Dragonflies skitter across the surface, and a crane rises slowly from the reeds, its wings flapping like a loose tent flap in the wind. You crouch, drink from the stream, and pull a bit of bread from your pouch. It's dry as a bone, but edible with enough chewing. This is when you hear it, a sound you've come to recognize instantly. Hoofbeats. Not yours, not expected. You rise slowly and spot 2 riders cresting a hill behind you, moving fast. For a moment, your heart jumps. Bandits? But no, they're wearing Yam tokens, shiny and unmistakable. Government couriers, like you. One raises a hand in greeting as they pass. You do the same. Brief eye contact, a nod of mutual fatigue, and they're gone again. Dust rising behind them. You think about how many of you there are, spread across thousands of miles. It's like a secret brotherhood, or maybe just a secret exhaustedhood. There's no glory in this job. No songs, no medals, just dry lips, calloused hands, and scrolls that must keep moving. Your back aches in new and creative ways when you wake up. You roll over, swatting at your blanket like it personally offended you, and blink blearily at the dawn. The fire's out, the air is cold, and a beetle is very determinedly climbing up your boot. You flick it off without ceremony. Another glamorous morning in the Mongol Postal Relay. The chestnut mare is already awake and munching the surrounding grass like she invented breakfast. You give her a pat, stretch your arms with a loud crack, and start preparing for the next leg of your ride. Today's route takes you east-northeast, edging closer to a caravan highway, a major trade artery where merchants, pilgrims, spies, and messengers all pass like grains through a silk funnel. You're not taking the main road yourself, but the Yam routes weave near it often, like twin threads in a giant imperial loom. The land here begins to change. Gone are the endless flat grasslands. Now, low hills rise around you, and the wind smells faintly of pine and dust. You ride past small shrines marked with prayer flags, red and gold scraps fluttering like whispers in the breeze. A group of herders are crossing with their yaks in the distance, their silhouettes bumpy and oddly majestic. You wave. One of them raises a hand back. No words. Then again, what would you say? Nice yaks feels too intimate this early in the morning. You fall into rhythm, letting the mare set the pace. She's quick-footed and responsive, a real upgrade from the grumpy gelding of yesterday. You're making good time, good enough that your thoughts drift back to the great Khan himself. It's easy to forget that this whole postal system didn't appear fully formed like some divine gift. No, it was carefully shaped by Genghis Khan and expanded by his successors. He knew that to control an empire spanning from Korea to the edges of Hungary, he couldn't rely on shouting across valleys or sending messages by random caravans. He needed a system, fast, dependable, and above all, loyal. So he created it. The yam, meaning checkpoint or station, became the veins of an empire. At its height, historians believe there were more than 1,400 relay posts across the Mongol world, spaced at intervals of about 25 to 30 miles. And each one stocked with fresh horses, guards, food, and sometimes even translators. Because this wasn't just about moving Mongol messages, it was about moving information. Trade reports, diplomatic updates, census data, marriage proposals, tax records. You pass a grove of skinny birch trees, their leaves trembling in the wind, and think about how this system compared to others at the time.
In medieval Europe, for example, mail was a luxury, carried by churchmen, nobility, or paid runners. It could take weeks, even months, for a message to move a few hundred miles. Delays were common. So were lost letters, which often meant stolen, burned, or used as impromptu bookmarks in monasteries. The Mongol Empire, by contrast, had riders like you crossing entire continents in days. There are records of couriers covering 200 miles in a single day by switching horses every station. It sounds absurd until you remember how fast a fresh steppe pony can go when it's not weighed down by saddlebags, armor, or indecision. And here's a quirky little fact. Each official courier carried a pesa, a bronze or wooden tablet that granted them authority to requisition horses, food, and shelter. It was like an early imperial passport meets VIP backstage pass. The higher the rank on your pesa, the more you could demand. Some riders had golden ones. Yours? A modest iron piece. Gets the job done. You remember one writer boasting about how he once showed his pesa to a local chieftain and was immediately offered roast lamb, a fresh horse, and the chieftain's second-best boots. You're still jealous about those boots. The sun climbs higher as you reach a small watchtower beside a dusty bend in the trail. A lone guard waves lazily from his perch. You wave back, passing without incident. This stretch is considered safe, but you're always told to stay alert. Bandits don't often target couriers. There's not much profit in scrolls and saddle sores, but desperate people make odd decisions. You stop for a brief midday rest at a shaded outcropping, letting your mare graze while you chew a leathery strip of dried goat meat. It's not great, but it's fuel. You take a sip from your water skin and watch clouds drift over the hilltops. For a moment, you let your mind wander. What if the scroll you're carrying is a declaration of war? What if it's an invitation to a wedding? What if it's a love letter disguised as troop movement? Historians still argue whether some couriers ever broke the seal just to satisfy curiosity. Officially, it was punishable by death. Unofficially, well, a long, boring ride through the wilderness does things to the human spirit. You wouldn't dare open it, but the temptation is real. You check the seal, still unbroken, still bearing the official stamp. A snarling tiger, claws out. Subtle. In the late afternoon, you arrive at one of the nicer relay posts you've seen. 3 yurts, a proper wooden corral, and even a small raised platform for drying meat. A couple of riders are already there, chatting with the station keeper, who waves you over. She's tall, broad-shouldered, and radiates the kind of calm authority usually found in older horses and storm clouds. You hand over the scroll for logging, swap horses, this time for a muscular gray stallion, and accept a bowl of soup without asking what's in it. It's hearty, spicy, and surprisingly good. You feel almost civilized. One of the other couriers tells a story about a message that once got passed between 7 riders in a single night, each galloping full speed, relay to relay, across nearly 300 miles. You raise your eyebrows. He swears it's true. You suspect at least one of those riders was part deer. That night, you lie under a borrowed wool blanket beside a low burning fire.
The stars are sharp above you. 1,000 glittering commas in a sentence the world keeps writing. You're tired, bone-tired. But there's also a strange pride warming your chest. You've come far. The scroll is intact. This system works. Not perfectly, not easily, but reliably. And that's more than most empires could ever claim.
By now, the saddle feels like an extension of your spine. You barely notice the sway, the creak of leather, or the rhythmic clop of hooves on packed earth. What once made your knees scream and your lower back question your life choices has settled into something like familiarity. Not comfort exactly, but a begrudging truce between your body and the job. The gray stallion is a dream. Sure-footed, responsive, and with just the right amount of arrogance. He moves like he knows he's the best horse in the district and expects you to keep up. You decide to call him Batu. Not aloud, of course, but in your head. Every good horse deserves a name. The terrain begins to shift again. Rolling hills flatten into high step, a kind of plateau that feels closer to the sky. The grass grows shorter here, wind-cut and wiry, and the horizon stretches so far you swear you can see the curve of the earth. There are fewer birds, but more marmots, darting between rocks like furry, chittering speed bumps. You pass an old stone marker, half-buried, worn by centuries of wind. It's etched with what might be a Turkic script, or maybe just decorative swirls. Scholars still argue over markers like this, who carved them, what they meant, and whether they were mileposts or memorials. You just know they break up the landscape nicely. The ride today is longer than usual. Your next relay post is spaced farther out, one of the few gaps in the otherwise obsessive spacing of the YAM system. Maybe the geography made a closer station impractical, or maybe someone just forgot. Empires, even Mongol ones, are still run by people, and people misplace things all the time. Keys, goats, entire villages.
You crest a ridge and pause. Below, nestled between two ridges like a secret tucked in a pocket, is the relay post. This one is beautiful, clearly an older site, with smooth flagstones leading to a circular courtyard and a banner flapping from a wooden pole. Someone here has pride in their work. A boy rushes out to greet you, maybe 10 years old, barefoot, and covered in what might be horse paint or lunch. He takes Batu's reins and leads him away with exaggerated care. You swing down, stretch, and hand the scroll pouch to the station master, a stocky woman with arms like tree trunks and a gentle smile. She offers tea. You accept. Inside the yurt, the walls are decorated with faded ink drawings, maps likely, or old courier routes. You sip your tea and ask how long she's worked this post. 23 winters, she says, but who's counting? Then she snorts and adds, "My son, he counts. Always wants to know when we're moving to a city." She gestures to the tea. "Not until you can find this in Karakoram," she says. The conversation drifts into comfortable silence. When you ride out again, you're given a sleek black horse with a white blaze and legs that move like wind on water. The trail now begins to dip downward, curling through narrow passes and dry riverbeds. It's the kind of terrain that demands alertness, too easy to twist an ankle or miss a turn. You remember a cautionary tale from courier training. One rider got turned around in fog and ended up riding in a circle for a full day. When he finally showed up at a station just a few miles from where he'd started, he insisted he'd crossed a mountain range and 2 rivers. No one corrected him. They just fed him and quietly updated the map. The sun is dipping low when you reach a small rise and spot something glinting in the valley below. It's not a relay post. Too small, too messy. You ride closer and realize it's a merchant caravan, encamped for the night. Silk banners flutter,
camels snort, and someone is burning something that smells like ginger and horsehair. They see you, but no one calls out. Couriers are like shadows to them, part of the landscape. Still, one older man nods respectfully as you pass. He knows what it means to travel this land under the Khan's seal. That night, you don't sleep in a yurt or under a tree. You find a shallow cave, just big enough to shield you and the horse. It smells like wet rock and old lichen. You make a tiny fire, not for warmth, but for the sound. There's something about crackling wood that tricks your brain into feeling less alone. You take the scroll out again, not to read it, but just to look at it. The seal is slightly worn now. Dust clings to the edges. The leather pouch is scuffed where your thigh rubs against it as you ride. But it's still whole, still sacred, still moving forward. You think about how many hands touched this before you. The scribe who wrote the message, the officer who sealed it, the first courier who passed it to the next. You're just one link in a long, invisible chain. There's something oddly comforting in that. You drift off to sleep with the wind sighing across the cave entrance, the black horse shifting quietly beside you, and the knowledge that, at least for now, your message is still on time.
You wake up to the sound of hooves. Not yours, not near. Just the soft, distant rhythm of another rider crossing the morning silence. Barely audible, but there. You lie still for a moment, blinking in the bluish half-light of pre-dawn. The cave has gone cold. Your breath fogs the air in soft puffs. The black horse snorts nearby, shifting its weight, ears flicking toward the sound. Whoever's out there isn't coming closer, just passing through, like you. Another courier maybe, or a patrol, or one of those rare merchants too paranoid to sleep near his own caravan. You sit up slowly, rub the stiffness from your shoulders, and begin to saddle your horse. Today's route is through tougher terrain. Gone are the gentle curves of the steppe. Now you're in the highland folds, rocky trails, narrow passes, and long switchbacks that demand your attention. It's slower going, but there's a strange beauty to it. The grass gives way to patches of wild thyme and scraggly brush. Mountain goats watch from ridges with the smug expression of animals who know gravity personally favors them. The relay system didn't shy away from geography. The Mongols weren't just conquerors, they were logistics experts. They made the land work for them. If a message had to go over a mountain, then by the eternal blue sky, a relay post would be carved into a cliffside if needed. And some were. You've heard rumors of stations built beside icy livers, where fish were smoked right next to scrolls being dried from snow exposure. One courier swore he saw a post that doubled as a falcon roost. You'd better like feathers in your soup, he said. It's protein, technically. The trail ahead narrows between two cliff faces. You pause before entering. It's the kind of place that echoes too much and invites avalanches with bad poetry. The horse hesitates too, sensing your tension. But you go, step by step. The hoofbeats bounce off the rock like a heartbeat, louder than you'd like. Halfway through, you spot something carved into the stone, a small symbol, barely visible. A circle with a line through it, one of the old directional glyphs used by Yam riders. It means, keep straight, do not turn back. Cheery. You obey, pressing forward until the path finally opens into a dry basin flanked by boulders. A relay post waits here, if you can call it that. It's a single stone structure, half collapsed, with a leather awning tied over the entrance. Smoke curls faintly from a pit fire. An older man emerges. His beard is half braided, half forgotten, and his hands are covered in charcoal. You dismount, pass him the scroll pouch, and get a grunt in return. Inside, the shelter smells of smoke, onions, and someone's wet boots, but it's warm, and there's stew. Always stew. You sit cross-legged beside the man, eating quietly. He doesn't speak much, but when you ask how long he's been here, he replies, "Since horses had knees." Fair enough. You swap out your mount for a dusty bay with the stamina of a mule and the personality of a philosopher. Not fast, but reliable. Sometimes that's all you need. You set out again, your pace steady but slow as the landscape dips into low hills scattered with stones. It's here,
in this quiet emptiness that your mind begins to wander. You start thinking about why the Yam worked so well. Not just the stations, the horses, or even the terrifying consequences of delay. It was the simplicity of it. One rider, one stretch, then the next. A chain of responsibility, each link focused on a single task. Get the message to the next link. No more, no less. Compare that to the tangled mess of medieval Europe's mail system, where messages might pass through monks, merchants, political enemies, and finally land in the wrong inbox entirely. The Mongols didn't have bureaucracy. They had order. Ruthless, elegant order. There's even a story about Kublai Khan receiving a message delivered by relay in under 2 days, faster than most royal summonses in France could even leave the palace gates. When Marco Polo wrote about it, Europeans thought he was lying. He wasn't. You climb a narrow ridge, the trail barely a hoof wide, and pause at the top to look out. Below you stretches a low valley, golden in the sun, flecked with patches of wild sage. In the distance, a ribbon of smoke marks your next relay post. You allow yourself a brief smile. You're making good time. As you descend the trail, something flutters by your face, a paper scrap. You catch it, clumsily, and realize it's not paper at all, but a strip of silk, dyed red, with faded characters inked along one edge. A prayer flag, maybe, carried by the wind, or dropped from someone's saddlebag. You tuck it into your coat. At the next post, the atmosphere is livelier. 2 other couriers are there, arguing gently over who had the worst road conditions. One claims a wolf chased them for half a mile. The other says she had to ride through a hailstorm with a dislocated shoulder. You win by default when they see your face and say, "You look like your scroll's cursed." You share a laugh, some dried pears and stories of bad meals and worse horses. One of them swears there's a station up north where the soup is made with goat hoof jelly and a dash of sandalwood. You pretend not to gag. This station has a special feature, a signal fire tower. It's not used often, but in emergencies, say if a post is attacked or a message must bypass the usual chain, a fire is lit atop the tower. 1 flame means danger. 2, urgent message arriving. 3, that's reinforcements needed. You stare at the unlit beacon for a moment, wondering when it last burned. After a short rest and a modest nap, on a surprisingly fluffy pile of straw, you remount and continue. The sky is turning amber now, the shadows growing long. You'll be riding into dusk, but that's fine. The roads here are clear. Your body moves without thought, adjusting your balance, checking the pouch, reading the trail ahead with the easy intuition of someone who's been doing this longer than they expected. You pass a circle of stones where someone once made camp. In the center sits an old iron kettle, blackened by 100 fires. You don't stop, but you smile. It's a sign, an echo of another rider who came this way, maybe last week, maybe years ago. You keep going. When the stars come out, you hum to keep yourself awake. Just a few notes, over and over. Nothing with lyrics. You don't want to remember any particular words right now. You just want the sound to carry you forward, step by step, hoof by hoof. And under that wide, breathless sky, your thoughts begin to settle. The message you carry may be urgent. It may be boring. It may be the kind of political nonsense that fills a governor's hall with forced smiles and spilled ink. But right now, it's your only job. Keep the seal unbroken. Keep the horse moving. Keep the message alive. You ride deeper into the dark, the wind brushing your cheek like a secret.
The cold seeps in as night deepens, but you barely notice it anymore. Your body has learned to adapt. Layers of felt, wool, and animal hide shield you like a second skin. The air is sharp, scented with pine and distant smoke from villages tucked far below. Somewhere, a dog barks, or maybe it's a wolf. You decide not to care either way. Your horse's hooves drum steadily over frozen ground, each beat a pulse in the quiet. The stars above glitter with a clarity that feels almost alien. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a pale river, spilling ancient light down into the valleys and peaks.
You remember the stories your trainer told you about these parts, how riders once used the stars to navigate, memorizing constellations as if they were landmarks on a map, not just for direction, but as a calming ritual, something to hold on to when the world becomes a blur of night and cold and exhaustion. Historians still argue whether Mongol couriers relied more on these celestial guides or their finely tuned knowledge of the terrain. Probably both, you think. As you round a bend, a faint glow appears on the horizon, your next relay post. It's smaller than some, just a cluster of yurts gathered near a frozen river, but you're glad for the shelter it promises. You can almost feel the warmth of a fire before you arrive. When you pull up, a young woman runs out to meet you, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She takes the reins and grins. "You're just in time for supper," she says. "We have roasted mutton and barley stew, and hot tea." You want to kiss her, but you don't. Instead, you nod and let her lead the horse away. The sweet, smoky aroma of cooking fills the air, wrapping around you like a soft blanket. Inside the yurt, the walls are lined with embroidered tapestries depicting battles, hunts, and festivals. You sit cross-legged by the fire as the woman serves you a bowl of stew that's surprisingly good for the middle of nowhere. Between bites, she tells you about her life here, how her family has tended this post for generations, how the Yam is more than a postal system. It's the lifeblood of the empire.
She pulls out a worn leather book filled with hand-drawn maps and notes. "This is my grandfather's journal," she explains. "He rode these routes during the reign of Kublai Khan. Sometimes I think he knew more about the land than anyone else." You ask about the challenges of the route. "Winter storms," she says without hesitation. "Sometimes the passes are blocked with snow, and we have to wait for days. Other times it's the wolves. They're curious but cautious. And then there are the bandits, though they've grown fewer since the empire's reach tightened." She pauses, eyes narrowing. Historians still argue whether banditry was ever really a threat to the Yam or just a story to scare new riders. You chuckle softly, imagining yourself as prey in a wolf's bedtime story. As the night deepens, you help prepare the horses for the next stretch, brushing down their coats and checking the gear. The woman watches quietly, then offers, "Not many get to rest properly along these routes. You're lucky." You nod, feeling the truth in that. Later, when the others have drifted off to sleep, you step outside the yurt to gaze at the stars again. The cold is biting, but the sky is mesmerizing, a vast, endless canvas that somehow makes your burdens feel lighter. You take the scroll from your pouch, examining the faded seal once more. It's been carried over mountains, across rivers, through wind and snow. It holds not just words, but the weight of countless hands and hopes. You tuck it back safely, whispering a silent promise to keep it moving. Sleep beckons gently now, a soft tide rising to carry you away. Tomorrow, the journey continues. Dawn breaks with a pale wash of pink and gold over the horizon, spilling light onto frozen earth and frost-glittered grass. You're already awake, the quiet ritual of waking horses pulling you gently from sleep. The black horse from earlier, Batu, waits patiently, steam rising from his flanks in the cold morning air. The next leg of your ride promises a shift in scenery and pace. The flat plains give way to thick forests, pine and birch stretching upward like endless towers. The air smells richer here, heavy with resin and damp earth. Your boots crunch on fallen needles as you guide your mount through winding paths shadowed by branches. These forests can be tricky. While the open steppe offers clear sight lines, the dense woods play tricks on your eyes and ears. A snapped twig, a sudden gust of wind, it's easy to imagine a bandit or predator lurking just beyond the next bend.
Your hand instinctively brushes the hilt of your short sword, a quiet reminder that the job is never just about riding fast. The Mongol postal system's genius wasn't merely speed, it was adaptability. Each station was designed for its environment. In forests like this, relay posts were often fortified with wooden palisades, offering shelter not only from the elements, but from potential threats. At times, you'll find a small garrison posted to guard the route, especially near borderlands or unsettled regions. You reach a clearing where a wooden watchtower rises above the treetops, a rare sight in the steppe, but essential here. A pair of riders stand guard, exchanging nods as you approach. They accept the scroll without fuss, handing over a fresh horse with a quick, "Good luck." The trail here narrows further, twisting around ancient trees and over mossy stones slick with morning dew. As you navigate the tight turns, you catch glimpses of wildlife, a flash of a deer's white tail, the sharp call of a jay overhead. These forests are old, older than the empire itself. Somewhere beneath the roots and soil lie remnants of forgotten villages and lost travelers, swallowed by time. You think about the courier before you, who they were, what they carried, where they dreamed of going when their shift ended. It's easy to feel isolated out here, but the Yam connects more than just places. It connects people, stories, and histories. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' mastery of communication was their most important legacy, or if their military conquests overshadowed it. You think it might be both. By midday, you arrive at a station nestled on a moss-covered hill. The air smells faintly of smoke and pine sap. The station master is an elderly man with sharp eyes and a slow, deliberate manner. He greets you with a warm smile, offering fresh bread and cheese. While you eat, he tells you about an unusual tradition. Every year, riders gather here for a festival celebrating the Yam, honoring the horses and the routes with songs and prayers. It's a rare moment of levity in a harsh life, a reminder of community and gratitude. He hands you a small wooden charm carved in the shape of a horse's head. "For safe passage," he says simply. You tuck the charm into your pocket. The afternoon ride takes you out of the forest and onto a series of rolling hills. The light shifts with the clouds, dappling the landscape in soft shadows. You feel the pace pick up, your horse eager to stretch its legs. Ahead, a distant plume of smoke signals your next destination. The air tastes of earth and impending rain. You reach a bustling relay post, one of the larger ones, with stables full of horses and riders coming and going like a well-oiled machine. There's laughter here, the clinking of metal, and the comforting clatter of hoofs. You swap horses once more, passing your scroll along with a nod. As you mount your new horse, you glance back at the network of riders and posts, each one a vital thread in the vast tapestry of the Mongol Empire. You settle into the rhythm of the road, your mind easing into the timeless flow of message and motion.
Night falls again, but this time you find yourself crossing a vast, shimmering lake by ferry, a rare interruption in the steady hoofbeats of your journey. The wooden boat creaks softly, laden with horses, riders, and cargo, gliding through the still water under a sky full of stars. The smell of cold wood and damp leather mingles with the sharp scent of pine drifting from the nearby shore. You wrap your cloak tighter, listening to the gentle slap of water against the hull, feeling the steady rocking beneath your feet. It's a strange, peaceful lull amid the rush of your usual ride. The Mongol postal network's reach astonishes you. You've crossed frozen steppes, jagged mountains, dense forests, and now this lake, because the Yam didn't wait for geography to slow it down. Wherever a message needed to go, the infrastructure followed,
even if that meant building ferries or forging new paths through wilderness. You watch as the ferry approaches the opposite shore where a relay post waits. Its walls are built from thick timber, the roof steeply pitched to shed snow in winter. A group of riders awaits, exchanging greetings and preparing fresh mounts. You hand over your scroll, feeling the familiar weight lift from your satchel. One rider glances at the seal and nods appreciatively. "This one's important," he says quietly. You wonder what news it carries. Orders, warnings, perhaps a request for supplies. You'll never know. As you saddle a new horse, you overhear chatter about the various challenges these ferry crossings pose. Storms, ice, unpredictable currents. A courier jokes about nearly being launched into the lake by a rogue wave, and you can't help but smile at the absurdity. Historians still debate whether these water crossings were the weak link in the Yam or a testament to Mongol ingenuity. The next stage takes you along a narrow ridge overlooking the lake, the water stretching out like glass below. The moon's reflection dances softly on the surface, broken by occasional ripples from a fish or a passing bird. You ride slowly here, savoring the momentary calm. The horse moves easily, its breath steaming in the cool night air. You think back to the many hands that have carried this message before you, riders, scribes, station masters, and you feel part of something much bigger than yourself, a living chain that has spanned empires and eras. You pause briefly at a small shrine near the path, where travelers have left offerings of coins, ribbons, and small carved figures. You add a silent prayer for safe passage, knowing the road ahead will soon demand all your focus again. The final miles stretch before you, the landscape softening into rolling hills and open fields. You push the horse into a steady gallop, feeling the familiar rush of wind and speed, the ground blurring beneath you. Ahead lies the next post, your destination for the night, a simple yurt surrounded by warm lantern light. You dismount, handing over the scroll with a nod. The station keeper offers you a bowl of hot broth and a place by the fire. As you settle down, the weight of the journey begins to lift, replaced by a deep sense of accomplishment and quiet exhaustion. You close your eyes, the steady rhythm of the fire crackling mixing with your thoughts and dreams. The Yam has carried this message farther than you ever imagined. Tomorrow, it will go farther still.
Morning greets you with a soft mist hanging low over rolling grasslands, the sun a pale orb barely warming the air. You feel the familiar ache in your muscles, the stiffness that comes from writing long hours. But there's no time to linger. Your scroll needs to move, and you're part of that living current. The terrain here is different. Open, sprawling plains dotted with wildflowers and small streams. The horizon stretches endlessly, offering both freedom and vulnerability. There's nowhere to hide in these vast spaces, which means speed and endurance are your greatest allies. You mount a fresh horse, its coat dappled like the sunlight filtering through the morning haze. The animal snorts, eager to run. You lean forward, urging it onward. The Mongol postal system's brilliance wasn't just in physical infrastructure, but also in its human network, carefully selected riders who knew the land and its moods. Each rider was trained to endure hardships that would make most modern couriers reach for a cozy office job. As you ride, you pass through small encampments, families, herders, and traders who rely on the Yam as a lifeline. It's not just about imperial messages. It's about connecting communities scattered across a vast, often harsh landscape. Historians still argue whether the Yam's influence extended beyond military and administrative uses into everyday life as much as oral histories suggest. Midday sun warms your back as you pause beside a crystal-clear stream, dipping a hand into the icy water. The coolness refreshes you, a brief reprieve before the afternoon stretch. Nearby, a herder tends to a flock of sheep, glancing up with a friendly nod. You think about the contrast between these open plains and the dense forests you crossed earlier, or the rugged mountains you'll soon encounter. Each environment demands different skills, different strategies. The Yam was not a single path, but a web, flexible, adaptive, alive. Ahead, a small hill marks the site of an ancient watchtower, now in ruins but still proud in silhouette against the sky. You imagine riders centuries ago resting here, scanning the horizon for signs of trouble or the faint glint of a distant rider's lantern. You press onward, the rhythm of hooves a steady, soothing cadence. At one point, you notice a curious practice, riders marking trees along the route with notches or symbols, a sort of early postal graffiti. These marks helped guide riders and alerted others to hazards or changes, a subtle language spoken in wood and bark. You smile at the ingenuity, small signs carrying big meaning. As evening falls, you reach a large relay station, a bustling hub with dozens of horses and riders. The scent of cooking fires and leather fills the air. You hand over the scroll, your task nearing completion. The station master, a jovial man with a weathered face, offers you a hearty meal and a warm place to rest. You trade stories with fellow riders, sharing tales of harsh weather, narrow escapes, and the strange joys found only on the road. You feel a kinship here, a bond forged in shared purpose and long hours under the sky. As you settle down for the night, you reflect on the journey, the terrain, the people, the relentless movement. The Yam is more than a postal system. It's a living thread weaving together an empire, its stories, its people. You close your eyes, the soft sounds of the station lulling you towards sleep. Tomorrow, your final stretch awaits.
The dawn is gentle, almost reluctant to wake the world. You stir beneath your blanket, feeling the familiar weight of the scroll pressing against your side. Today marks the final leg of your journey, a fact that brings a quiet thrill mixed with a deep fatigue. You rise and step outside, the morning air crisp and filled with birdsong. The sun spills gold across the landscape, painting the grass and distant hills in soft light. The horses neigh softly, impatient to begin. Mounting your steed, you set off with a steady rhythm, the path smooth beneath you. The landscape transitions again. Rolling hills give way to cultivated fields and clusters of villages. Signs of civilization grow clearer. Smoke from chimneys, the distant clang of blacksmiths, and the chatter of market days. The Yam here hums with life, a bustling artery connecting the heart of the empire to its farthest reaches. Riders move in groups, sharing news and supplies. Children wave from roadside, their eyes bright with curiosity. You pass through a small town where locals gather, offering bread and fruit to passing riders. The sense of community is palpable, a stark contrast to the lonely stretches of wilderness you traversed earlier. Historians still argue how much the Yam influenced everyday commerce versus purely administrative communication, but here it feels like both, blending seamlessly. As you near your destination, the pace quickens. The final post stands proud atop a hill, flags fluttering softly in the breeze. You approach with reverence, handing over the scroll to a senior courier who greets you warmly. With the message safely in their hands, your task concludes, but the legacy of this vast network remains, a testament to human endurance, ingenuity, and connection. You dismount, your legs heavy, but your spirit light. The journey has been long, marked by cold nights, fierce winds, and moments of quiet beauty. As you rest, you think back to the countless riders who came before you, carrying messages across mountains, forests, lakes, and plains. The Mongol Yam was more than a postal system. It was a lifeline, a thread weaving together an empire's vast tapestry. You breathe deeply, feeling the gentle pull of sleep as the sun climbs higher. The road behind you fades softly into memory. And now it's time to rest.